Welcome to the Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
Hello.
Hey.
Guten Tag.
Aloha.
Hola. Shalom.
Hello.
Namaste.
Ni hao.
Privet.
Hello.
Salut. Yassas.
Salve.
Ciao.
Bonjour. Our podcast talks about the latest trends in the worlds of cryptocurrencies and the blockchain. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Crypto and Blockchain Talk. And there's so much going on in the news. I had no choice but to get my old favorite, and old not because he's old, because he's certainly not, old favorite because he's a very old dear friend now of mine, Karhrman Zeigenbein. And Karhrman is an expert when it comes to crypto crime, cryptocurrency education, crypto education of any kind for law enforcement. And I always have a good laugh with him because he's just a scream. So before we go any further, hello, Karhrman. How are you?
Hello, Aviva! And no, don't listen to this woman because she is lying. I am old. I am really old.
No,
and I'm
not.
very tired at the moment, okay?
Yeah, and folks, don't listen to him,
Yes.
folks, because the reason why he's tired is he's doing daily kickboxing classes. That's going to make anyone tired, Karhrman. It doesn't matter how fit you are. You're a nutbag, and you're definitely working. I mean, I expect to
My
see...
wife is forcing me. That's
Well-
because I'm too big as well.
Oh, jeez. Okay, yeah, well, it doesn't matter how big you think you are. I'm telling you now, you're more fit than most people I know. So, I mean, you have to be because you can't do daily kickboxing if
I'm
if you're
dying
not
every day
fit.
almost. I'm almost at death. I crawled home today. I was laying on the couch working. I'm still half dead, and tomorrow morning I have to do the whole thing again. It's like, I'm no fit.
Yeah, okay. Well, everyone, my name is Aviva Ounap. I'm the host of Crypto and Blockchain Talk, and it's going to be an interesting podcast as usual. I mean, I love these kinds of podcasts. I love when we do these.
We all
Because-
love them. You're doing so good with it. I
Oh.
mean, you're the best podcaster on the planet in crypto radio.
Do you know what? From your
What
mouth...
can we say? You are just awesome.
From your mouth to
Yeah.
someone's ears. That's all I have to say. I hope our listeners' ears. But, it's been interesting because, hackers stole over $500 million worth of crypto and nobody really noticed. That's the first thing that needs to be said because on March 29th, Ronin, the blockchain network, announced the theft of 173,000 approximate Ether tokens and $25.5 million worth of USD coin tokens. Now, this network, the Ronin network, is best known for their connection to the NFT game Axie Infinity. And this is where, and we talked about this actually in the last couple of podcasts about gaming, funny enough. This is where players earn and trade and sell tokens, and then they have to raise and train these Pokemon-like monsters. Now, this theft translates to losses that are around 600 million US dollars at the time of the announcement. But when the announcement was made, by the way, that hack had already been in progress a week prior. Now, the corresponding assets were worth 540 million on March 23rd, which was the date of the hack. Okay. So by that definition, and this is where we're in our element here, Karhrman, this Ronin incident now comes second in terms of the all-time biggest crypto heists in history. Okay. Now, we have covered hacks, cons, all kinds of rug pulls, phishing exercises, and scams on this podcast, for all the years that this podcast has been online, which, by the way, dates back either to, I think, 16 or 17. I can't remember what year we launched now. But the whole point is that we have been following crypto heists for the longest time. And of course, in first place of all of these hacks is the Poly network, which in August of 2021 was around 600 again-ish million US dollars. But the thing is that nearly all the funds were returned by the hackers after the theft because the attackers only wanted to expose apparently security risks on the platform. And we covered that. Do you remember that, Karhrman?
Yep.
Yeah. So we covered that in a prior podcast. And folks, to all of our listeners, remember, you can go back and look through the library and you can just look for Karhrman's name in a past podcast. And that's the one where we probably talked, well, that's one of the ones we talked about, the Poly Network. But, a lot of these crypto heists, they're happening on all kinds of scales. I mean, a heist, I don't even know what the definition, I don't even know if there's like a number amount where all of a sudden it's called a heist, but every day there's crypto hacks, every single day. And, we're seeing the number rising, and we also covered this on a podcast just recently, that the number of hacks that are happening are really steaming up. It's showcasing this is showing to be one of the biggest problems of the rising interest in and the usage of crypto, and also DeFi solutions, because DeFi solutions are becoming very interesting to hackers, as well as also gaming solutions. So another thing you and I talked about, Karhrman, which was really just, I think, last month, was the wormhole hack, where the hacker stole around $320 million worth of Ether tokens.
That was a good one. That was a really a good one.
Well, let's talk about that for a second. Why do you think that one is worthy of being called good?
Because you have this is like a double whopper. So you have and it comes down to the code. So the code, it was actually kind of easy for the hacker to do it. That was number one. And that comes really down to that when you build so much stuff like they do in that's been done in the crypto space, which is awesome. You think of it like we want to go to the moon, not with the crypto price, but with a rocket. And so we have to rush and we have to put everything together. And so, things are falling a little bit to the side and breaking, And that's how crypto is, because it's evolving so fast right now that, they're not really doing a perfect job there. They couldn't, otherwise it wouldn't be so fast if you want to secure and do everything properly. And then on top of it, you have a bunch of, crooks running around there as well. Like the Wonderland one. This is a real good one, because so this was the first part. That's the regular whopper. Now the next whopper part, the meat part, is actually Quadriga on it. And that was really the hammer. So the guy, actually one of the co-founders, you heard it too, was actually there working there. He was the treasury. He was holding all of the funds.
It's crazy.
I mean, you can't really make that up. And now he left the place, and he started his own thing. He's starting his own portfolio under Sifu, so 0x Sifu. So you can find him on Twitter too. And it's like, wow, the dude has been gone, I think, in prison for credit card fraud and some other stuff. Then he ended up again in the crypto space, and that's really it's a big problem. And it's so much money. So would you give anybody a couple $100 million that just came out from prison for financial crimes and that did a lot of other things, and then comes from Quadriga? So
but that's the proof right there and then. It's so freaking disappointing, because we're constantly telling people to do their research and to do their homework, and then it just makes you wonder, how the frack, are people investing in projects like this? Oh.
So yeah, but they didn't know. So that's really the really bad part, because anybody, if the average Joe Doe that goes out there, that says, oh yeah, I want to invest in that, they look through it, they wouldn't have found it. So they wouldn't know about that. And that's really the really bad part. They should be really shunned for life.
Yeah, they should be, but they're not.
It's really a crime. It's a scam.
Well, of course it is, in a major way. But I mean, the thing about, I just mentioned Wormhole in February, where where the hacker stole the 300 something odd million worth of Ether. The good thing about, well, I don't want to say the good thing, the pleasant outcome of that was that the users were compensated for their losses by the trading platforms. Yeah. Wormhole's not a trading platform, but the users of Wormhole, they were all compensated by Wormhole for their losses. And that's a good thing. And I think that's happened only in a couple of circumstances. But in 2021 alone, hackers made off with $4.3 billion in crypto, in the US dollar equivalent. So, and I should qualify that as well with the following, that the DeFi protocols accounted for 1.4 billion of the 4.3 billion. and then the other 2.3 billion were lost due to fraudulent activities. So I guess I have a couple of questions for you, because it's going to be, especially when you have lately, let me just bring up the article with Biden. Hold on a minute. There's I want to quote.
Which one?
It's the one where Biden wants to go after. Hold on, let me find the article.
Crypto taxes or the exchanges that still work with Russians or still have Russian customers?
No.
No.
It's okay. So first, what I want to do is I want to talk about, like, the president of the United States, Joe Biden, said that he's going to generate 11 billion in revenue by
Jesus.
by basically looking into the use of cryptocurrency in terms of ability to be used in ransomware and other kinds of nefarious activities that
most ransomware is Russia, so you would be back at Russia. So it's like, I don't know, 70% or 65%, all of the ransomware with, crypto involved is all Russia.
Yeah, but you know what? I mean, America and China and India and Australia have their own little populations, and everywhere around the world. There's a lot of really good hackers out there. And I mean superb hackers, just like the ones that we alluded to just a minute ago, who have actually stolen from crypto platforms just to prove that they can do it. And then, of course, they hand back maybe not all of the crypto they stole. Wink, 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 nudge, nudge. But, what they're doing is they're saying, I did this just to show I can. But there's a lot. The whole idea of tech is growing in terms of how people are learning, and we're unleashing a whole new world of people out there who have the capabilities. And especially, we all have to keep in mind that a lot of DeFi products and a lot of gaming products aren't decentralized. Yeah, they're maybe trying to use decentralized platforms, some of them, but many of them are centralized platforms, because you have to start out centralized in life.
Yeah, at the end, they're all really centralized. There's nothing that is decentralized, because it has to be hosted somewhere, etc., etc. So there's nothing that is really like decentralized. The government can always go after it, but nothing against the great United States government, but they're not going to get that job done. I mean, the only thing they can get some money is through taxes, and then really push down on that. But then on the other side, there are a lot of people who don't use an exchange where there's KYC. So that's another big issue. The trend is going to decentralized. So in peer-to-peer, so nobody's doing that anymore. So meaning I'm putting my taxes in there and I'm getting it sorted out, but a lot of people don't. So I don't think he's going to get all that money. And then plus, if you think if we do the law enforcement training, so we're law enforcement instructors, so nobody has a clue about crypto. Now, who's going to chase them all? The SEC, no clue about crypto. Nothing against the SEC either.
Yeah.
But no clue and not enough people. Oh, who's going to do this? Maybe chain analysis, and then they just have a software and they know by themselves any of the numbers that they put out about fraud are always wrong, because nobody knows. Most of the stuff is undetected. So even on Coinbase, you have terror groups that are doing fundraising, and that's with KYC. So it would take like a little army just to get it. And I don't know how he came up with that amount, 11 billion or so, but it's utter nonsense, I think. It's not going to go anywhere.
Well, okay, so let's just talk about that for a second, what you just alluded to. So, you're out there and you're training people all the time from all these different backgrounds in law enforcement on how to catch the thief, on how to catch these people. And, I think that it's great that all these people are getting the necessary instruction from you. But do you think that they need to have more than just the courses with you maybe? Do you think that they also need to have the appropriate IT background? Do you think that that's a necessity in order to do this stuff? Because I'm not being funny. It's like putting a weedy little, a weedy person like myself in the ring with a boxing grate. It would be impossible, I think, to punch your weight and try to catch somebody unless you were technically savvy, because these are, this is some of this stuff. I'm sure if we saw how it was done and we would look at it and think, oh my God, that just seemed too easy. I'm just wondering, do people really need to have not just that educational background, which I know you're supplying in leaps and in handfuls to everyone around the world, but do they need to have more than that?
If you think now, if it's like a private practitioner, means like, private investigator, forensic guy or so, or girl, then they should have a really rounded foundation. So meaning like all the crypto stuff, of course, but they should understand also hosting dark websites, hosting on the Web3 stuff, crypto domains in general. They need to understand a little bit more than just what we would teach in there.
Right.
We teach a lot, but there's some of the other things that you would need. Now, let's say Biden wants to do that. He doesn't have to teach everybody the same thing, because on one side you have, for example, let's say we find the crypto assets, or we're looking for the crypto assets on a premise, so at a house or something like this. All what needs is for example, 2-3 guys. Let's say for this one case number A, Z, and for that case, we have 3 guys that go on premise to do a search. These 3 guys need to understand codes, ciphers, Shamir secret, and they need to be good in searching. So searching, everywhere in the house. They need to understand also what you can do to hide your cryptocurrency. So let's say I have my 12 mnemonics or 24, then I would use Shamir secret. I'm just throwing it out as an example. Shamir secret, instead of having now this one piece of paper with my 24 words, I have now 10 secrets. And these I'm going to share with my wife and whoever it is. And I need only 3 to put it all together again, to get back to my mnemonic phrase, to get back to my money. So this is what they would look for, or on the back of phones, etc., etc. So they would search already properly. So you have that team already done. Then you need another team that looks just at the financials. So, and that goes from, for example, from fiat. How did it actually go from fiat to crypto? So how did they do this actually? So the on-ramp, how did it happen? Did they take money out of a bank account? Was it drug money? And then how did they purchase the crypto? Did they do it with a street dealer? Let's say they go to Huddle or so, or like one of the local places, and they exchanged, for example, paid twice the market price with the money that they want to launder. So that would be another thing. So it would be a different team then that just looks at the financial stuff. And then you can have a third person or third team in there that does actually the traveling. So they actually go out and do some of the regular investigation work. Who are these people? Where are they? Where are they located? And then, try to find them and arrest them in this case. And then you have the recovery guys that are just looking at recovery, that working with the search folks together, and pretty much with all of them together. And so if you have them all in there, it's almost like you have to create different jobs, because one person, really, it's going to be kind of hard to learn all of it. So you would have to have different careers, set up different careers for that in law enforcement or in some of these investigation units, and then have them trained in different things.
I think you're about to be on the back foot, because, a bill was introduced in the U.S. Congress on Monday, which basically looks to recreate the virtues of cash, privacy, and all of this in a digital currency format. So this new eCash Act is going to allow the U.S. government to experiment with digital dollars, which are going to be stored on hardware and not in bank accounts. And these are all going to be used. They're making it so you can use it without an internet connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's this idea now that there's going to be, from the government or from within the government, this I guess some people are saying that's going to be this equivalent of surveillance-proof currency. And they also believe, a certain group of people, that it's going to put paper money on this path to extinction. But you see, this is the thing. First of all, I'm not so sure that any government-issued crypto is going to be surveillance-proof, right? The second thing is that if you're going to go ahead and then start creating your own digital dollars or stable coins, US stable coins, whatever is going on there, you need to have a fleet of people who understand what the hell is going on in this space. And I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're anywhere even close to that.
I mean, like if you do this, let's say we create a digital US coin or a dollar coin or so. Yeah, you have to maintain it. You have to secure it. And it's not just like building it and putting it there. They have to do a lot of work and keep doing a lot of work. And then B, for them or for the government, it's kind of good, but then for the citizens, for the people, it's really bad because now they will know every single transaction. It's like in Europe and some countries, like Spain, Portugal, you need a NIE, it's an NIE. So wherever you make a larger purchase, and when I say larger, I think it's like a couple $100 or so, then you have to give that number. And that number registers pretty much what you're purchasing. Now, this thing is on steroids in this case if you use a digital dollar, because now you have all of the purchases and you can segment everything. And you can pretty much understand what every person is doing. You can forecast, of course, how the economy is going. Do we have an inflation? Maybe you can read this a lot earlier than you usually do, but then you probably won't care anyway, like some other person does now. So it's going to be a lot of more surveillance on the people. And then what is happening with that data? That's another thing. So who is actually taking care of this data? Because everything will be registered. There will be like you, for example, buy a bread today and you buy another bread. Now you're eating too many carbs. Maybe your health, especially in America now. In Europe and other countries, they won't care. But in America, the insurance company will say, hey, or even, if the insurance comes to the government, you are really eating too much white bread. I can see this here.
Yeah, I can just see a text coming on my phone from Joe Biden. Hey, listen, cut down on your carbs. Your ass is growing bigger. I mean, I don't know. I mean, just something ridiculous in terms of the secondary, the data that's going to be collected. I wish to God I could say to everybody it's just going to be for pure holistic reasons that they're going to be amassing this data and then repurposing it, but we both know better.
And remember, and I'm sorry to my great U.S. government, but the incompetence that we have in the U.S. government.
Ugh.
Remember when they built that website for the healthcare during the Obama time?
Yep. I do.
There was a website for, how much was it? $800 million? I don't even know. You cannot even make that stuff up. That was a website. Now let's think about the digital dollar.
Jesus.
So, and that website never worked properly, by the way. So
no,
it's going to be a rough one.
So, okay, I'm just looking right now to see. Now, okay, well, I don't know what the outcome of this next piece is, but it was floated that Russia's looking to accept Bitcoin, right, as for their oil and gas export payments from friendly countries. And there are a list of friendly countries that Russia obviously still does quite a bit of business with. You also read today, which you can talk about what they're doing with the ruble. So maybe we should talk about that first. So go ahead, Karhrman. Tell us what's going on with the ruble.
That's an amazing one, and I picked this up today at TASS. So this is the Russian news agency, and they were saying that Putin signed a decree today that starting actually tomorrow, I think, on the 1st of April, that everybody, and I think it's the unfriendly countries, so which means Germany, United States, France, etc., that they will have to pay for the gas that they receive in Europe in rubles. And the way it has to work in this case is that they have to open up an account with a Russian bank in Russia, then transfer euros or dollars into that bank account, and then exchange it into rubles, and then make the payment. Wow, that was a handful, a mouthful, whatever. Anyway, yeah. But then a couple days ago, I think it was yesterday or the day before, he said, oh, no, we're not going to do this. And today he just did it. But it is not really, I didn't see it anywhere else really in the news or on Twitter or so. I just saw it on the Russian side. When I look sometimes with the news, I just look at the countries itself, usually, when I look for stuff. And, I saw it in Russia. So, and that's quite interesting. News seem to be sometimes I think quite late anyway. Things that are already out seem to be taking quite a long time in the United States to, read some out if Will Smith is beating up poor Chris Rock.
What are you kidding? Will Smith slap slapped the Ukraine war off of everyone's radar. I mean, it overtook the news. It's amazing, actually, because somebody actually told me a kind of like quip the other day. They said, Putin single-handedly got rid of COVID because, of course, once Putin invaded...
I know, isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
There's no more COVID.
Yeah.
It's just this boom. Oh, wow. We don't have any COVID. We had to sit at home for 2 years now and no COVID anymore.
It's amazing. So Putin invades the Ukraine. You don't even see COVID on the front pages anymore. Now Will Smith comes and slaps Chris Rock. And what happens? It wipes the Ukraine war off the front pages of everything. It's crazy, isn't it? I mean, well, that's a different podcast altogether about priorities. But let me ask you this then, because it is true that, or it seems to be the case, because even the BBC is reporting that Russia's basically telling unfriendly countries that they won't supply gas if it's not paid in rubles. But obviously it's like, I mean...
Yes, that's what they say too, that they make them delinquent and they will not provide any gas.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. Isn't that like a power move? Isn't that a great chess move? It's a Garry Kasparov move because it's strengthening the ruble, isn't it? Because you're forcing people to make astronomical payments because, of course, they're not buying they're not filling up a trike. They're not filling up a Yugo. They're buying millions. I don't even know if it's billions. I mean, they're buying millions or billions of dollars worth of gas.
Yeah.
So
it's
crazy.
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you look, the Europeans, so I'm all for, going to Ukraine and just wiping all the Russian soldiers out of that place. But the thing is, the Europeans, I'm sorry to say this, can I worse use, I'm going to say idiots now. These people are greedy idiots too, because they get all that stuff from Russia. And then Russia does all sorts of bad things, and they say, it's all right. And now even to the last minute they're still getting stuff from Russia, but they put all these sanctions in there. They make absolutely no sense. Then they are too dependent on Russia. They're too dependent on gas as well. Remember, they wanted to all go all green in I don't know when, but in just a few years. So this is never going to happen. So the Europeans don't spend anything on their military. So they have an adversary there in Russia. They buy stuff from them. They never do anything about their military. So this is the ex-chancellor. So it's just the Europeans really put a number there, and I think it's all about really money. It's a lot of greed there.
Yeah, but it's always about that. Politics and war revolve around, greed and the very few. I mean, we're talking about, a small amount of people dictating the outcome of billions of people's lives based on really strange and backroom activities.
That's why we need a revolution.
Yeah, and you're right. Look.
So last week on maybe Friday or Thursday, we got a text from the U.S. government that we can go home if we need to with a passport that is with expired passports and documents. And then this was for global. They sent us this was for global, not just for Spain or it was just for all of the Americans that are anywhere in the world. And then they sent another one out, and I think it was Friday. I gotta lie, I'm not sure. And that one says that you should not travel or do not travel to Russia. And if you live there in Russia or if you're in Russia, leave immediately. But you don't see this anywhere in the press either.
Well, yeah. And do you know what the interesting thing is? I mean, it doesn't matter passports, what's that? You have billions of people crossing illegally. But now, I mean, apparently there's multiple groups of tens of thousands of people who are marching right now to the U.S. border from the southern. So I have to tell you something. Passports don't mean anything.
They do this all the time.
Yeah, well, passports mean nothing now in the United States. You don't need a passport to get in. There's tons of Russians and Ukrainians who are going into the United States from Mexico. And I also just saw actually on Vice, it's a really great journalism, really great investigative journalism. Basically, the Mexican authorities, under the cover of night, are loading the Russians and the Ukrainians into buses and putting them through a checkpoint which is not even in use these days, and bringing them across the border into the United States. So, and they don't even have, they have nothing. They have no identification, some of these people. Some of these people have no ID. They don't have it's not even that they have a passport. They have no ID on them. So
that's the great Mexican government.
Well, I'm not being funny, but it doesn't matter if you've got a recent, relevant, expired, non-expired. Everyone can just pile in there now. I mean, they'll listen. I'm sure if you call Biden up right now, he'll send a plane for you. But what I will say is this: what they've done, I personally think, with this rubles thing, it's a reaction to the U.S. the G7 freezing Russian gold. Yeah, because they basically said that they were going to.
Oh, I forgot gold too.
Yeah,
you can also pay with gold.
Well, yeah, and there's a good reason for it, that they want people to pay in gold, because they're trying to. It's because it's part of those sanctions, and it's part of the sanctions. It's also part of these. What's it called? What's it called? What's the word for when you're grabbing people's assets? Well, I'll just say grabbing people's assets. It's part of this. Yeah, it's part. Yes, exactly.
Seizing?
Yes, it's part of the seizure of assets of anything to do with Russia, because what they're hoping is that this will destabilize Russia by basically not allowing them to have their access to their stockpiles of gold. And, did you ever see some of these like really old black and white movies where, one guy just taps the other guy on the shoulder and the other guy just taps him back a little harder. And then there's a shove and then a bigger shove. And the next thing you know, not only are they punching it out, but there's like 40 people now involved because one of the punches went astray and punched somebody, and the punch landed on someone else. And then you have like a Keystone Cops thing going on where there's like 40 people in one group bashing another 40 in another. It all started with literally a tit for tat kind of thing on the shoulder. This is where we're going right now, I have to tell you, because, it just seems like one thing happens and there's obviously a reaction. So for every action, there's a reaction. And so because Russia has between 100 billion and 140 billion in gold reserves, and that's around 20% of the holdings in the Russian central bank, it's basically, the fact that they're trying to stop Russia from having access to the reserves, but at the same time, Russia wants to use gold to evade the sanctions. So it's kind of laughable if you think about it, because like you just said, they want to stop Russia from having access to any gold reserves that may be outside of their country, which I have no idea where the hell they are. And at the same time, they're saying, yeah, we'll take gold for any gas that you want to pay for. So I don't know. I mean, what do you think?
I think it's going to be, I don't even know what to think anymore.
No, I don't
I think it's just like, I would like to have my peace, and they all stop, please, and just get a life.
No, really, I mean, you're right. I mean, Will Smith, I think, the Will Smith, Chris Rock thing, I think a lot of people were actually thankful, in a way, to stop seeing the war for 5 seconds, because I think after COVID, after 2 years of being inundated with quarantines and death and more death and shots and angst and horrible stories, and no one could go anywhere, no one could travel. And then we went straight from that it was not even we went straight from that straight into a war, which was just constantly being played 24/7, with Russia now saying that they may be accepting Bitcoins, though, for payment.
He didn't seem to be, in the past when they interviewed Putin regarding cryptocurrency or cryptos, he does not look very excited about anything that has to do with cryptocurrency. I know they worked on a digital ruble. They might have it already. But cryptocurrency or crypto assets from somebody else, like Bitcoin or so, I don't think they are too excited about it. They're probably more excited about it rolling out their own digital currency out. Also, this is just what I heard, but I'm not sure, is that when you have, and this is when you're registered, so you purchase something, registered crypto assets like Bitcoin or whatever, that it goes to the bank account through a Russian bank. So you have to deal with the Russian bank, and they do the KYC and they do the selling and all that stuff. Not sure how that works really with that bank or with these banks that they have in Russia, but this is just what I heard recently. Yeah, most of the Russians probably will use anyway a decentralized exchange. I mean, like they're not going to be registering nothing, I think, if they're not too stupid. And then remember also Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine actually has the largest percentage of the population that owns cryptocurrency and that uses it. It's actually Ukraine is number one, I think, Russia number two, and then USA is like 4 or 5 or so. So these two countries actually, and the Ukrainians are really doing well with it. Like, they're raising funds for the war. I mean, in regards to crypto, it's just amazing how they pull that off. They did really a good job. And then the Russians are not stupid either. The Russian people itself, so they know how to use crypto as well. But I think they're gonna stop it in Russia, and they're gonna push it probably also to the digital ruble. Remember also, if you lose a ruble now, let's say somebody would freeze something, like they do now, that Russian ruble, it's like similar with a stable coin. I mean, you can always get that back in most of the cases. Like if somebody steals stablecoin USDT or the USDC, for example, they will be able to freeze it and then return these funds at least. So in the same thing, the same control you will have if you have a digital ruble or crypto ruble or crypto dollar in this case. And so the time where somebody can just freeze your accounts, if it's yours, your currency, these times are going to be kind of over then at that time.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting. If I don't have gas tomorrow, get your rubles out, everyone. We're going to have a collection.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah,
this is terrible.
Do you have gas or electricity where you are?
Here's everything is electricity, but I just bought a gas grill. So I have to buy some gas tomorrow.
Yeah, okay. Good luck with that. So, right. It seems that Saudi Arabia is now saying that they're going to sell oil in Chinese yuan instead of in US dollars, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and it's not the first time that China's tempted to buy oil in yuan rather than in the US dollar. And it looks like Saudi Arabia is considering doing this. Now, if Saudi Arabia actually does do this, the US dollar, or I should say it's the petrodollar that we're actually talking about here. And that's the actual name of any US dollar that's paid to an oil exporting country so that they will in return get oil. And that's what the petrodollar is. And you can imagine how many petrodollars or how many dollars are being exchanged around the world just based on oil and gas products. So if Saudi Arabia actually decided to go through with this and really hold their hand tighter onto the Chinese yuan than it did the US dollar, and of course China would be more appreciative of that as well, that would really destabilize the US dollar, I think, to a great extent, wouldn't it? Yeah.
So things are not really that rosy at home, and that's probably why all these things are happening. 80% of the population has gone nuts. I mean, then we have inflation, like the prices are super, super high. So a lot of people can't afford chicken anymore. They don't eat chicken, they don't heat a lot because they can't afford the oil, etc., etc. Food has gone like crazy. Cars also, like you can what is it, a Bronco? I saw a Bronco, a used Bronco, the new Ford Bronco that is out there in the US. They have now the used ones, $96,000. The used cars cost more than the new cars. Like my car that I sold, was sold for more than I purchased it when it was new. So it's like, and so the United States is not really stable right now. So it's like, I would say, we're moving closer and closer to, like, let's say, a civil uprising. We're not very stable. And so all these other countries look at us and then, of course, look at our president. I'm sorry for everybody who voted for him. He's not much better than the other guy we had. Yes, so they're looking at it and they say, wow, this is, America is kind of like gone, is in the decline. So they're looking at the whole thing. The life of the average American is just not very good anymore. So they have to work more, and they have less, a lot less. And then if you look at, the violence, like crime in New York City, when I was working in New York City, it was like there was nothing going on. You could sleep outside. That was after Giuliani was mayor there. He cleaned everything up and it was peaceful. Now they have stabbings and robberies at the subway and at the train every 5 seconds. It's like in the old movies. You remember the movies out of the 70s from
Yep.
John Carpenter?
Yep.
Ah! This
Crazy.
is now the subway in New York
Crazy.
City. So, and now, like, look at Saudi Arabia, and they all say, okay, which one is the next country that is coming up? And it's going to be most likely. Their system, which is probably not perfect, seems to be working a lot better and a lot more. While they do a lot of surveillance and all that stuff, they seem to be taking much better care of their people, at least what we can see from the outside. And I know they will say they torture people, they put people in camps. But with COVID, for example, they shut a whole city down. They don't care how much it costs, just that nobody gets COVID or the least amount of people is dying. So that quite amazes me, actually, because here, look at us. We just like, so I think like Saudi Arabia, they all see now China is the new emerging power. And then plus China, and I don't know if you have been often in the Caribbean or in, some other Latin American countries. So let's say like if you go to the Bahamas or some of the other islands, what you always will find is a Chinese school. There's going to be a Chinese school and maybe a new stadium that was paid for by the Chinese people. So the country itself, China, is promoting their way of life everywhere. If you talk to folks in the Bahamas, they will say just the very best thing about the Chinese. If you go to Africa, people will say the very best thing about the Chinese because they go there and they create schools, they help them, etc., and they're promoting kind of like the Chinese way of life. The Chinese communist hybrid system that they have there. So, and I think that's kind of like, U.S. is in decline, China is rising. And so China is probably going to make the way because we don't have our stuff in order. We're United States is so bad right now that you don't even know where you would start fixing it. So I don't know. I would think U.S. is in decline. That's why you see this. You see Saudi Arabia. You see Russia attacking the Ukraine. And then also we're looking at, hey, yeah, they want to get the land back or they want to free the people or whatever. But look at it. Look at all the problems that we have since they invaded the Ukraine with our supply chain. When we talk about wheat, agriculture, all of the things that we rely on, there's a lot in the Ukraine. So this war might not be just about, hey, yeah, because they have 5 Russians and we want them to live here. This is about resources most likely. And remember, we have climate change too, which most people don't believe in, but there is climate change. And meaning when you have a farm, for example, people can talk to the farmers if they know somebody in their area. They will tell them it gets worse and worse every year. They have more fertilizer. If you look at the fertilizer price, nutrient or mosaic, it's all skyrocketing now. So, and you can see people are preparing. And then the UN report in regards to climate, that it's too late anyway to do something. So all of these things are coming into place. And guess who has a lot of resources in regards to, a lot of corn, wheat that they collected over time? It's actually the Chinese. The Chinese are really well off with all that stuff. So I think everybody goes towards China. Even the Germans, when you ask them, some of the politicians, they will say when they talk about the future, and some of the French politicians too, when they talk about the future of who they are going to do business in the future, more than do with the United States, the only country that's coming up is China.
In terms of what's happening, with what I was just telling you about with the petrodollar, and if they start accepting, if the yuan displaces the dollar, it's going, because right now, at the moment, I just looked this up, 2.48% of the world's reserves, the world's oil reserves, are held in yuan, as compared to 55% for the US dollar. So if you replace that 55% for the US dollar with 55% for the yuan, I think you're going to be wiping your butt with US dollars. I mean...
Yep, you're going to be wiping your butt.
Well, do you think then... And this is where I guess I was kind of trying to segue to. Do you think then that Bitcoin is a better bet than the US dollar in terms of long-term feasibility? Okay, go for it.
No, because Bitcoin, remember, Bitcoin, you can't use it for anything. What are you going to do with it? You go to Macy's. Let's say we set up Bitcoin at Macy's in New York City in Manhattan. Yeah, on a Thanksgiving Day or so, or the day after on Black Friday, Bitcoin is going to be falling apart, breaking into little pieces, and nothing's going to happen. Not
Oh,
enough transaction. So you could use the only thing if you say, okay, anything we can replace it with, then you would have to use the Binance Smart Chain. That's the only one that is feasible at the moment in regards to speed, throughput, and everything. And it's still probably not even going to cut it if you think about, hey, a whole country is going to use it or the whole world is going to use it. Cryptocurrency, crypto assets are not at that point. And Bitcoin especially is not going to get to that point anyway. It's going to be like a classic car down in the future because there's nothing new happening to it. You need for all these things that you see there about smart contracts. If you remember when Binance got the Binance chain out, there were no smart contracts, okay? They just copied pretty much Ethereum and threw it out there, but without smart contracts. They had a higher, the transaction rate was higher, but nobody wants to use it because there's nothing you can do with it really. I mean, you can use it for an exchange, to exchange funds, but that's it. But when you look at Ethereum itself and the smart contracts itself, that's really the big deal with crypto assets. It's less of the things where we say, oh, we want to use it for buying stuff or things like this. It's more about smart contracts and what we can do with them. And then when we think about buying stuff or using it for transactions, we need to have the kind of like how can I say it, the stamina to do all of these transactions. It needs to be strong enough, and Bitcoin is not strong. Ethereum is not strong either. What are you going to do? These couple of transactions per second? I mean, by the love of God, you won't be doing anything. Nobody will buy anymore. You could, if you run this in Amazon, would work.
Well, there are some other cryptocurrencies out there, I guess, that could work, but they all have their pros and cons. They all have their faults. So it's going to be a very interesting, I don't know. I don't even know. Let's just hope that, Saudi Arabia doesn't go in that direction because it would actually create a whole new world order. It would. It would be very quick too.
I think it's going to be a new world order. It's just not going to be it's going to be happening for sure. America is not in a good position. It's not in a good place at all right now. And it's not going to come out of it. So that one is a goner. Biden is not. Biden, the Republicans and the Democrats, they're not going to get anything. Nothing is going to happen there. Country will keep declining, will just continue to decline over and over again. It won't stop. And what you can see is it goes towards to the digital, not Bitcoin, for example, but the United States, a digital dollar, which is a crypto asset. China, a crypto asset, as their currency. Russia, a crypto asset. Everybody pretty much is doing it and working on it, and they're all going to push it out in the near future. So A, they can control the population better. B, they can see, what's working, what's not working. C, nobody can really take their money anymore and freeze it. So if we have a problem with another person or another country, and they say, oh, I want to freeze it, you can't keep it in your bank, my money, because I have the full control over my so-called stable coin or currency coin in this case.
So you're going soon to South Africa because you're going to be going to teach some crypto courses, et cetera, et cetera. And you're going to be educating people in the law enforcement community on all of this. When they're sitting down and asking you these questions about how cryptocurrency, is working and how you see the future, when you tell them, the facts about how Bitcoin, the transaction times are truly very slow, even though there's other cryptocurrencies out there, they're, like we just said, they have their own little quirks and issues. So really no cryptocurrency is up to the level of really being a replacement at the moment for anybody's traditional fiat currency, but they're great for obviously values of store, being a value of storage. They are good for just transferring. It's good for a transfer of money, obviously. But, when you're telling them, look, it's great for transfers, bad for payments, do you think that they then think to themselves, oh, well, then this crypto stuff is really only just for, it's only really for criminals because why in the world would somebody then want, do you think that they're questioning what the value then of cryptocurrency is? Because they
Yeah.
can't, okay, go for it.
Yes, I usually have to explain it to them. So as first you have to explain the bad part, which is it's crypto is not in a good stage if we think about like corruption, misuse. It's pretty bad actually right now. And that's not the users itself, because there's a lot of mainstream users now. It's actually the companies. Look at Tether, look at other places. Pretty bad what they are doing. So explaining this to them, but then on the other side, I always explain to them too that crypto is also the future, because there's so many things we're going to be able to do with it. And that's why everything is kind of exploding, and they're creating all this stuff with smart contracts and probably any other things that are going to come up down the road. So with Web3, we have all sorts of stuff floating around there, and all sorts of opportunity, not just changing the financial markets, the financial system, make funds accessible for people where there's no bank, for example, or just that somebody actually can send, like in Ukraine. The way they set it up, they can raise funds even if nothing happens, if nothing works, no bank works, no electricity, you're still going to get the funds. So this is just a genius thing. Self-driving cars. I mean, insurance, you can use it. Not crypto insurance, by the way. Everybody do never sign up for crypto insurance like Nexo or something like this. All scams. But like insurance, like a health insurance or a life insurance or a car insurance or purchasing a home. So there will be also a lot of unemployment that will happening with it. But then also you're going to have like entities that are running by themselves. Pretty much think of an entity that is its own company, an own corporation that runs self-driving car service, for example, just throwing it out there. So the opportunities are almost endless of world assets, of world transactions. For them, most interesting is, of course, too, is who's using it and how can they find the person, or how can they recover something. So let's say South Africa, it's a person being kidnapped. Then they're going to have to help to make the payment. So meaning like the police, for example, being called in, some of the private securities being called in. There's, okay, we're going to have to make a payment of, let's say, $300,000 in Bitcoin. How do we get it? Nobody knows. So these are kind of like the things I have to teach them. Right. How to get this stuff, how to get it quick, but also how to get it at the place where, not a lot of great exchanges there, not a lot of things there. Now you have to get the cash. How do you do, from cash quickly to that, to get that person back? So, and then it can be other things like, for example, human trafficking, drug trafficking, or also terrorism. They have a lot of terrorism camps lately in Africa, or not even lately, for a few years now, where people are being trained. So how are they being funded, and the fundraising itself that is there in the communities, but then also between the cultures. So we call it, I guess in Europe and America, we call it maybe tribes, but then in Africa, they call it cultures, for example. So how these different cultures, they have, arguments with each other, sometimes wars with each other, and cryptocurrency plays there a role as well. So there's a lot of different things where crypto assets are involved in there, and these are the negative things. So they are very interested in how to trace it. And they're also very curious in investing and stuff like this. So I always tell them how to do certain things, and no financial advice. But I try always to get them going on everything, that they have a good understanding, and that they are not too pessimistic on crypto. They shouldn't be pessimistic on it. It's really like, it's a great thing. It needs more regulation, but then more regulation will probably kill it and slow it down too much. So it is what it is. People just have to be careful and not believe everything that they see in there, and not put all of their money in there. It is a high risk asset. Everything you do with crypto is just super high risk. And so whatever you put into crypto, see it as a loss, not as a win.
There's one thing before we close out I want to cover, and it's a really serious thing. It needs highlighting, and people need to remember to talk about this with their children especially, and their loved ones. And that's that what's happening, and we've talked about this before as well, Karhrman, is that blackmailers are setting up fake profiles on social media, posing as very attractive girls, sending naked photos of themselves to boys, and then turning on the blackmail. And blackmail usually resorts in payment, and the payment they're requesting is sometimes in cryptocurrency. The reason why
Yes.
this situation has now become so serious is because they're targeting really kids. And what's even more sad is that within hours of one child receiving this photo, and he for some reason answered back, and then he realized he was being blackmailed, he killed himself within hours. And this was a high achiever. He's only human, hence the reason why he probably responded. This is a very serious thing. So I guess I want to close out this podcast first with some advice from myself and then some advice from yourself. So my advice is going to be, first of all, my advice is very simple. Don't send photos anywhere to anyone of yourself. And if you even have them right now on your phone, delete them, people, because they can fall into hands that you don't want them to be. That's the easiest rule of thumb. If you wouldn't want your mom to see the photo, then don't have it on your phone. That's the first thing. The second thing is that people have to remember that social media is very much, in most instances, the equivalent of a cesspool. So you have to be very careful in navigating it. And especially if you don't know who the heck you're talking to, because the world is just full of anonymous idiots. Over to you, Karhrman. What advice do you have?
Don't pay. Just let it go. It comes out anyway. Take it as a man or as a girl, but do not pay and don't get too upset about it. It is what it is. That's just what I can say there. But of course, like what you said, delete everything that you have in there. And I know some of your kids, they have a lot of junk on there. So if you don't delete it, then you're going to have to kind of own up to it, but don't pay for it. Because if you pay once, you're going to have to pay twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times. They're going to put you on the list of the ones that are willing to pay. And then you have to pay more than one time. And you're just going to be the person that, is going to be abused in this case. So you just let it go. And you can give it to the authorities, or you just let them. And think of it like this too. They're having like 100 children. They're not going to release everything all the time. They're too lazy. These people want to make a quick buck. So if you pay quickly, then you are on the list. So I would not do anything. I would just let it go. They can have as many pictures as they want. Just my opinion.
And I'm going to add one more thing to it. Nothing's ever worth killing yourself over. Seriously, guys.
Yeah, it's 2022. If somebody sees you naked, don't worry about it.
My God, there are countries in the world where literally they walk around naked half the time.
Yes.
So look, I just want to thank you, Karhrman, for coming on to this week's edition of Crypto and Blockchain Talk.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Hey, no, it's always a pleasure, and I can't wait to have you back on again. I would like to thank everyone for tuning into this week's Crypto and Blockchain Talk. Please remember to tell your friends and family that they can also download these beautiful podcasts from one of over 70 different podcasting platforms. We have a list on cryptoandblockchaintalk.com, but you can also just Google and you can find out where our podcast is being played. In addition, we also stream these podcasts on our sister radio station, Crypto24radio.com. Crypto24radio.com plays news, music, and more 24/7 around the world. We love to hear from you, and of course we have our social media handles, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But first and foremost, we like to hear from you directly through email. So please email us at education@savvydigital.com. That's education@savvy, S-A-V-I-I, digital.com. We love having you as our listener. When you tune into us, it means the world, and we appreciate the fact that you're giving us your time and energy to just tune in and listen to us. So please, be safe, take care, and goodbye for now.